Hello, my name is Andrew Arnold, and today I will be presenting on prospects in the information technology industry, a business report I completed for BCOM 2050 with Professor Schick. The purpose of this report is to compare various fields in the information technology industry, see what the requirements are, what the jobs actually entail, and the compensation for the jobs. First one I'll be going over is databases, followed by cybersecurity, and then networking. So as I said, the first one will be database administrator is the job. You can see the average salary there, $78,779 per year. I'll spoil it a little bit and tell you that that is the second. It's the middle of the three, but by a good margin compared to the third place one. Pretty much all data used by a company will be in a database of some kind. For instance, let's compare a store that has inventory, and if they have an online presence and a actual brick and mortar store, the inventory would say how many of a particular product they have. And you don't want to sell things online that you just sold to a person in store. So say the database will be updated as the point of sale software completes the transaction. It'll do something to update the database number, which would tell how many of that thing they have. So if it sold the last one, it won't allow people to buy it online. That's how it could interact with the day-to-day business operations. Just about every business will require some sort of database. They might farm it out to another company and not see the actual nitty-gritty of it, but that company would have a database administrator then. The types of things a database administrator might have to do in a report are things like jobs, which are basically how anything happens in the database. Anything goes in, anything comes out, anything is updated or changed inside of the database, like for instance, the aforementioned inventory. A query is a thing that a database administrator would write in SQL, which is it's a scripting / programming language used just for databases pretty much. And a query would fetch certain information out of the database based on however the person wrote the query. A report is something else you might do. A report is kind of like a query in a format that can be used. It's when the data comes out of the database and is made into a report, and then it could be used, like say in the store manager might want an inventory report every day that tells him how much he has of everything. It would pop out, and the database administrator, one thing he has to consider is how usable does that information come out. It has to come out in a way that is usable for the end user. And databases can be so integral to how the business works that many database jobs are basically 24/7. People can be on call. Many places will have you're on call this week, you're on call this night, whatever schedule. For my sources, for one of my sources, I interviewed Joe Myers, who's the database administrator for Data System Services, which is where I also work. He is the only guy on call. So unless he's on vacation, he is always the first person who's contacted outside of normal work hours, and he's actually contacted by me. That's one of my jobs, is to contact him. And I can say from what I do, from what I've done, he basically is contacted once a week, maybe once every other week on average, and has to do a couple hours of work to fix something that's currently melting down, which is, I would consider once a week outside of work hours to be a lot. Maybe some people have more of a tolerance for that, but I consider that to be a lot of outside the normal minimum 40 hours a week work time. As part of talking to Joe, he let me know how he spends his average work day. He said it's split pretty much evenly between developing, firefighting, and routine admin. Developing is creating a lot of the stuff I talked about before: queries, jobs, reports, stuff. Nothing's an emergency. Just usually just doing stuff that's been requested by the users or by his bosses. Firefighting is emergency, kind of more emergency stuff that's happening right now during the workday that he can go in and fix if he needs to fix something in a job, or if the input, sometimes the job will be fine, but the data the users are putting in are sending into it is bad in some way, and it changed in some way. So it's not necessarily like fixing his mistakes, because a lot of people, whenever anything bad happens with the database, they look at the database administrator, when sometimes it's not his fault for a multitude of reasons. And then routine admin is the other third of his day, which could be fixing non-emergency issues, streamlining jobs, stuff like that, hardware upgrades, you know. Uh, Joe also talked to me about requirements for the job. So almost nothing in the IT world really requires a certain certificate or degree, and databases is no exception. Having a degree is good. It'll get you past HR, is how they put it a lot of times. And then in the interview, they find out the two things that are really important, which is your experience and your knowledge. A lot of times in the IT world, if you know it, they don't care how you know it. If you got it from while getting a degree, or if you watched 100 hours of YouTube videos, if you know how to do the job, that's what they want. And the experience shows that you can do it in a professional setting. So those are the most important things. There are some Microsoft certifications for databases that are not bad to have. They're just a lot of work, and they're also kind of expensive, because Microsoft is pretty much the biggest player in the database world at this time. Although there are a lot of companies getting into it. SQL Server. If you know SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server, and you have a certification in it, that will make you more attractive to an employer, even if they don't use Microsoft systems. So it's good to have, but not required. Moving on to the next job we're talking about is cybersecurity analyst. This is more of the cybersecurity field in general. Analyst is, there can be a large variety of titles in cybersecurity jobs, but analyst is usually what you'd be called in your first tier of cybersecurity jobs, because the average salary here is a bit higher than database administrator. You're always hearing about data breaches in the news. Companies lose tons of money. They lose tons of customer support. Makes people mad when they lose their data. And these data breaches can breach the company. As I just said, they can breach the customer's data, or they can breach the company's data. Either one is very bad, very expensive. Security Compliance Associates reported that the average amount of money lost in a data breach in the last few years is about $3.5 million. But they're forecasting that number to balloon, and it's already started in just the last year. The amount of money lost in a particular data breach is ballooning, and they're saying it's going to be over. The average will be over $100 million per in just the next few years, the next 2 years. So cybersecurity analyst as a job will become more and more important as those things become more expensive for companies. They're going to spend money hiring people to prevent that much more money from being lost. The cybersecurity analyst, sometimes they'll do live monitoring of a system to see what's coming in, what's coming out. But a lot of times you're just dealing with looking at historical data and trying to see what, as I said, is coming in and coming out. And really you're looking at what are the criminals trying to do that they're maybe not succeeding at yet. And then also you want to keep up, a cybersecurity analyst has to keep up with what's been working. What have hackers and criminals been doing recently that's been working? When you hear about a data breach in the news, how did that happen, and how can we keep it from happening to us? So that's basically is an analyst job. And it's a lot less fiddling with technical stuff on a computer, and might involve more actual writing, just writing a report of analysis and so on. So similar to database roles, it doesn't require a particular degree or certs, although the Security Plus cert from CompTIA is considered a base security cert that is very good for people to have if they're looking to go into cybersecurity. Also for Department of Defense IT, if you're going to have administrator rights, you have to have some sort of security certification, and Security Plus is the minimum, is the lowest level that meets their requirement. You have to, or they will not let you do the job. And that is even in jobs outside of cybersecurity. Any IT job that requires administrator access requires that by DoD regulation. So that's the cybersecurity field. Next we have network administrator. Networks, it is difficult to, undervalue how important networks are in the modern day. Networks are what brought computers from being a hobbyist's personal computers from being a hobbyist's curiosity to being a part of everyday life that supports everything we do. Everything you do on a day, your car has computers in it. Everyone watching this video has a computer in their pocket. Computers are vital to everyday life, and most of it is because of networking, mostly, and the internet really is what it is. Uh, hooking Networking is just so important, and it's also really common. You can see here the average salary is pretty significantly lower. These jobs are very common, and a lot of times they don't require quite as much experience, but they're also more likely to require or be preferred to have a certification. There are plenty of networking certifications. There is, just like CompTIA had Security Plus, they also have a Network Plus certification, which is not quite as respected as Security Plus, but is nonetheless would be good to have when searching for a networking job. The big player is Cisco. They have their CCNA, which is a basic networking cert that is focused on specifically their routers and switches, their systems. But the networking knowledge you would get from getting that certification does transfer to anywhere. And even if a company doesn't use Cisco hardware or software, they will like the fact that you have a CCNA, but it is not required. Again, uh, it is not required for any of these jobs, very rarely. And frankly, even if a job posting states that a particular certification is required, the chances of that being a hard requirement are very, very low. So my conclusion is, based on all of this data, the thing that appeals to me the most is databases. Every class I've taken and self-study I've done on databases and SQL has shown it's definitely the most interesting thing to me. I do not like the 24/7 side of that job. I worked very long hours when I was in the Army, and I got out of the Army to stop doing that. But again, it's not a deal breaker. Cybersecurity is a pretty close second. I have a background in non-cyber security and analysis, and it would be, I get the feeling that would work. I would be pretty good at that, and I would enjoy it. So that's a pretty close second. Networking is a fairly decent third. I'm not thrilled about the topic, the subject matter, and also I can see the average pay is not as much, so wouldn't even have that going for it. So that was my conclusion. And my sources, all salary information is from Glassdoor. Joe Myers, database administrator for Data System Services. It was awful nice of him to submit to an email interview, and he provided me with a lot of good information. I appreciate that. CompTIA has all their certification information on their website, and then Security Compliance Associates, a website with lots of cybersecurity information. It's a pretty good site. I've got it listed here. So thank you very much.